The New York Giants tight end room has a brand new look. What can we expect from them this coming season? We're going to talk about that coming up next on the LockedOn Giants podcast.
You are LockedOn Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the LockedOn Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the LockedOn Giants podcast, part of the LockedOn Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Chain. I am a New York Giants beat writer. I am your host of the LockedOn Giants podcast, have been for the last several years. Happy to have you with us. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. And on today's program, we're going to talk Giants tight ends as we get you ready for New York Giants training camp. Boy, it's so close. Just the other day, yesterday, as a matter of fact, I got my media training camp schedule. And when that arrives, you just know that training camp is around the corner. So we're taking this opportunity here on the LockedOn Giants podcast to go through all the position groups on the team and talk about some of the biggest issues, some of the players, what we need to know, what might happen and whatnot at each position group. So today we are going to talk tight ends, and the tight end room, the New York Giants tight end room, is in a very unique situation in that for the first time that I can remember in a long, long time, a non-quarterback group has all new faces. Now, I know, you're probably saying, well, there's a couple guys returning from last year, Myrick being one guy. I'm talking about the main, the top guys. So let's kind of take a look at how we got here, who the Giants had and why they had to go in this direction. And we're going to start off with just kind of recapping last year. Now, Evan Ingram was first round draft pick, a guy who was kind of a disappointment, although, some people can make a case that the Giants never really used Evan Ingram to his strengths. I think it was a combination of not using him properly. Plus Ingram just, between the drops and the things that he should have been able to do that he wasn't able to do. I just, you question now if picking him as high as they did. I think they had the 17th pick with him. You question if that was the right move or if they should have gone with an offensive lineman or something at the time. Then you have Kyle Rudolph, who was signed by that management, the former management team. And when word came out about Kyle Rudolph's foot not being healed from his time with Minnesota, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that signing should have never happened. I know at the time, former GM Dave Gettleman said, well, we're the Giants. We do everything with class. Okay, great. You want to do stuff with class? I'm sure there's 50 million other ways you could have done something with class rather than to, uphold a contract for a guy who basically came to you and just wasn't, he failed the physical. So, the Giants banked on him having the surgery right away and being effective, being the red zone threat. And, we all know what happened there. He wasn't very effective, didn't look anything close to what he looked like when he was with Minnesota in his heyday. And I don't even know if he's signed now, but, he was getting at the end of his tenure there. And, I can understand the appeal with the red zone production, but the injury really should have been a red flag. And the Giants just said no to that signing. Then last but not least, you had Kade Smith. And Kade Smith, unfortunately, the guy was underused a lot, but also a guy who I think is not going to play anymore because he had that knee injury. It was said to be a potentially career-ending knee injury. So really a shame Kade Smith, who wasn't really used a whole lot in the offense, developed that injury and just, it looks like his career's done. So because of all that, the three tight ends that I just mentioned, the Giants basically had to build that tight end room up from scratch. So they brought back Chris Myrick, who, was on and off the team last year, on and off the practice squad. But the main guys right now are Ricky Seals-Jones, who they picked up from the Commanders via free agency. Jordan Akins, who was with the Houston Texans, and then, of course, the draft pick, Daniel Bellinger. So let's talk about each one of those guys for a moment now. Ricky Seals-Jones, former college receiver, converted tight end. He's been around. He's been a journeyman. He started his career with the Arizona Cardinals. More of a blocker, I would say, than a receiver. I mean, could he give you a few receptions here and there? Yes, but I think his bread and butter is as a blocker. Jordan Akins, I'm not as familiar with him, but I think he's more of a receiver type and was used as such in the Houston offense. Bellinger, however, is the guy that I am very intrigued by. Bellinger was mostly a blocker out in San Diego State, but he was also, when he got the receiving targets, he's also pretty good. And, as a matter of fact, Bellinger had 3 career drops. I think it was 3 career drops in, let me see, I wrote this down. Yeah, 3 career drops in 103 pass targets over the course of his college career. But they didn't really use him much as a receiver out San Diego State. Why, I'm not sure. I guess it was just the way their offense went. But Bellinger's the guy to keep an eye on. I think by the time this is all said and done, he's going to emerge as the number 1 tight end. All right, 4th round pick. Going to be the number 1 tight end before the season's done, because Seals-Jones is on a 1-year deal. Akins, I believe, is on a 1-year deal. Bellinger is going to be here for, at least 4 years, assuming nothing happens. And he's got a lot of upside. So the tight end room is still a work in progress, even though they've got 3 guys, and you can make a case that all 3 guys are going to make the roster. But coming up next, we're going to talk about how the Giants might utilize their tight ends. We're going to go back. We're going to take a little look at history, what the Buffalo Bills did. We're going to look at some numbers. We're going to look at what the Giants did and talk about what we might be able to expect moving forward. That's coming up next on the LockedOn Giants podcast. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's LockedOn Giants podcast. But first, if you're living paycheck to paycheck or struggling to make ends meet, it can be really stressful when unexpected expenses come up. Well, now Dave, D-A-V-E, can help you get out of a pinch when you really need it. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, buy a wedding gift, or catch up on your bills. There's no interest and no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief that they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and you need a little extra help, download the Dave app today. Again, that's D-A-V like Victor, E, from the App Store. Sign up for the extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. Future you will thank you. Terms and conditions apply. Instant transfer fees available. Visit dave.com/legal for complete information. Banking is provided by Evolve, member FDIC. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the LockedOn Giants podcast. I'm Patricia Traina. We're talking Giants tight ends. And Giants, they have completely made over their tight end room. Trying to figure out how they might use the tight ends in this offense, because the offense, like I said, is going to be a mixture of Buffalo and what Kansas City did. Well, the Giants tight end group right now, they don't really have a Travis Kelce, so I don't think you're going to see them use the tight ends quite in that role. But I think for clues, we'll take a look at Buffalo and how Buffalo used the tight ends. So I have some numbers for you. I visited Sharp Football Stats to take a look and see what some of the trends were with regards to the tight end usage by Buffalo last year. Buffalo used 12 personnel on 8% of their offensive plays, exactly 100 plays to be exact. 66 of those plays were used in the running game. Kansas City, from where, of course, Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator, comes from, used 12 personnel on 20% of the plays, or 270 total plays. 135 of those were running plays. The Giants, by contrast, used 12 personnel 26% of the time on 275 plays, 127 of which were used in the running game. Now, here's the thing with the tight ends and the usage. Ideally, The tight end is going to be used more so in the running game as one of your run blockers. And, if you have an offensive line that's really not solid in its run blocking, as was the case for the Giants last year, you might see a little bit more 12 and 13 personnel, those heavier packages to help with the blocking. Well, now that the Giants have presumably fixed the offensive line, presumably have a better offensive line, it stands to reason, will the Giants use the tight end as much, particularly in run blocking? That's what I'm kind of curious to see. And couldn't really tell by the numbers from Buffalo and their usage of the tight end. But here's what I can say. I think when you have a tight end in here, and it's interesting because, a lot of people ask me, well, why didn't they keep a fullback, or what are they going to do with fullback? I think what Brian Daboll wants to do is he wants to be able to have a tight end and a fullback who can, block, obviously, but also be a part of the passing game as need be. I think the passing game is going to really take precedent over all things else. I mean, they'll still run the ball, obviously, but this Giants team, I believe, is going to be more of a passing team than a running team. That said, let's go back and look at Daniel Bellinger. Daniel Bellinger, will he get as many opportunities as Dawson Knox got up in Buffalo? Dawson Knox had 49 receptions last year, and he was tied, I believe, for the league lead amongst tight ends in touchdown receptions with Hunter Henry at the Patriots. That's the role I could see for Bellinger. I mean, Dawson Knox, obviously receiver. He also did blocking. That's why I say I think that that Daniel Bellinger is going to kind of rise to the top, be the cream that rises to the top of this tight end group. He's going to be the core, the new main man. And I think you're going to see a lot of him. Now, maybe in the beginning, you're going to see a combination of Ricky Seals-Jones and maybe Akins, just until Bellinger gets up to speed. But I would not be surprised if come the end of the year, Bellinger kind of takes over most of the snaps. You just got to get his feet wet, make sure, he's acclimated and whatnot. But this is a kid who I'm really high on. And, whenever you make over a new position group, like the Giants have done with the tight ends, it's a little scary because you don't really know if it's going to work out. You're not really sure how guys are going to get deployed and whatnot. But I feel good about this tight end group for this whole reason that Bellinger just looked very smooth in the spring, looked, at home. And I just think they're going to really take advantage of his ability to block and his ability to catch passes. He was a very good blocker in college. And, nowadays in the NFL, it's really hard to find a tight end who can do both blocking and be a receiver and do it well, do both aspects well. Usually one part of their game is a little further along than the other. But with Bellinger, I think he's going to be able to give them what they need in both blocking and as a receiver. So he's a guy for sure to keep an eye on, and not just because he's a draft pick, but because I think the receiving aspect of his game was very underutilized in the San Diego State offense. I don't think that is going to be the case in the Giants offense. All right. Coming up next, some final thoughts on the Giants tight end position. Stick around. We'll be right back. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the LockedOn Giants podcast. I'm Patricia Traina. We're talking Giants tight ends, and I have a few final thoughts for you about the position. Daniel Bellinger, I mentioned before that the Giants are probably going to run a lot of 11 personnel. That under Brian Daboll, they typically in Buffalo did not run a lot of 12 personnel, but they did run a lot of 11 personnel, which is one running back, one tight end, and the three receivers. Having a tight end like Bellinger is going to be a big help to a team that wants to run 11 personnel the majority of the time. And the reason for that is that Bellinger, although he was primarily a run blocker at San Diego State, he can also pass protect, and he can also be a receiver. So he can do a little bit of everything that you need him to do. And that is going to be a big help to a team that wants to run 11 personnel a lot of times. Buffalo, I think I mentioned in the past, they ran 11 personnel on 71% of their snaps, and the Chiefs ran it 67% of their snaps. So if we're looking for clues as to what the offense might look like, 11 personnel is the way to go. And ultimately, it's going to come down to, do the Giants have a tight end that can do everything they need him to do? Run block, be a receiver, and pass protect. Ultimately, I think when it comes down to the final roster, I could see the Giants keeping maybe two tight ends on the roster, of course, barring any injuries, and maybe sticking one tight end on the practice squad. I don't think the Giants are going to keep 3 tight ends and then have an extra tight end on the practice squad, again, unless there's an injury situation. All right, that being said, it's not going to be a matter of Bellinger simply being a better version of Evan Ingram. I mean, when you're talking about athleticism, Bellinger isn't quite as athletic as Ingram is, but what he is better, besides the fact that he doesn't put the ball on the ground, is he's got a good enough build. Bellinger is 6'5", 253 pounds, so he's a little bit bulkier than Evan Ingram was. Should hold up better in terms of run blocking and pass protection. He's not as twitchy. He's not quite as fast. You know, you watch him on tape and he doesn't quite look like he's playing as fast as he's been timed, but he's not a lumbering guy either. He's a guy who can certainly get himself open, use that big body to shield the ball, be an asset in the passing game if they need him to. And, unlike Ingram, I don't think Bellinger's going to create mismatches, but he has the ability to make the contested catches and find soft spots in the zone, all things that Ingram really wasn't good at. So did the Giants upgrade the tight end position? I think with Bellinger, yes. Now, again, it's just a matter of putting it all together. But I would say, you look at the Giants tight end position, which was revamped, and I think it's a matter of addition by subtraction. One last thought on the Giants tight end group. Even though it's brand new and there's still some questions and still things we need to see, especially seeing these guys in live game action in this offense, I think overall, much improved unit group. Bellinger excites me. I'm intrigued by Seals Jones, who, again, we've seen in the NFC East games with the Washington Commanders. Akins, we'll see what he brings to the table. But at the end of the day, I believe the Giants are going to go with 2 tight ends and put a third guy on the practice squad. And they're going to continue running a lot of 11 personnel, which, again, Dable ran in Buffalo and Kafka came from the system in Kansas City that ran a lot of 11 personnel. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for us on today's program. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in to the LockedOn Giants podcast. Always appreciate you. And appreciate you also for making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Now, before we say goodbye, I want to tell you real quick about a special we're running here on the LockedOn Network. Which NFL stars move the betting line the most? Starting July 18th, LockedOn gives you the 50 most valuable players in the NFL from the odds makers at BetOnline.net. It's available July 18th on LockedOn NFL, wherever you get your podcasts. Spoiler alert, there is a New York Giant on the list. I won't tell you who. I won't tell you where he plays. I think you'll be surprised when you find out. So make sure you tune in.